Marcus Williams woke up at 5 in the morning with excitement running through his body. Today was not like any other day. For the first time in 3 months, he was taking a break from his computer screen and endless work meetings. The 34-year-old man worked as a software engineer for a big tech company, and his life was usually filled with codes, bugs, and tight deadlines. But today, he had only one plan: to go fishing at his lake. 6 months ago, Marcus got a phone call that changed his life. His uncle Thomas had died and left him a beautiful lake property. Marcus barely knew his uncle because Thomas was a quiet man who lived alone and rarely came to family gatherings. The last time Marcus saw him was at Christmas dinner 5 years ago, where Thomas sat in the corner barely talking to anyone. When the lawyer called Marcus about the inheritance, he could not believe it. Uncle Thomas had left him a small wooden cabin, a boat dock, and an entire lake surrounded by 200 acres of forest land. Marcus had visited the property only twice since getting the papers, and both times he felt like he was in a dream. The lake was perfect. It was not too big and not too small. The water was so clear that Marcus could see fish swimming near the bottom. Tall pine trees surrounded the lake like green walls, and mountains stood in the distance like sleeping giants. Wild ducks lived on the lake, and sometimes Marcus could see deer drinking water at the shore early in the morning. Marcus got dressed in his old fishing clothes, a worn-out baseball cap, a comfortable flannel shirt, and jeans with small holes in the knees. He made himself a strong cup of coffee and packed a cooler with sandwiches, cold drinks, and snacks. His fishing gear was already organized from the night before. He had spent an hour cleaning his rods, checking his tackle box, and picking the best lures for lake fishing. The drive to the lake took 45 minutes from his apartment in the city. As Marcus drove through the winding mountain roads, he rolled down his windows and breathed in the fresh morning air. The city stress began to leave his body with each mile. No honking cars, no construction noise, no people rushing everywhere. Just the sound of his truck engine and birds singing in the trees. When Marcus arrived at the lake, the sun was just starting to rise. Golden light spread across the water like liquid gold. Morning mist floated on the surface, making the lake look magical and mysterious. Marcus stood at the shore for a moment, just taking in the beauty. He still could not believe this peaceful place belonged to him. The small cabin sat about 50 feet from the water. It was simple but cozy, with a front porch that faced the lake. Uncle Thomas had kept it in good condition. Inside there was a stone fireplace, a small kitchen, and 2 bedrooms with handmade wooden furniture. The walls were covered with old fishing photos and landscape paintings of the lake in different seasons. Marcus walked to the dock where his small fishing boat was tied up. The boat was nothing fancy, just a 12-foot aluminum boat with a small motor. But it was perfect for fishing. Uncle Thomas had left the boat along with the property, and Marcus had spent a weekend fixing it up and making sure the engine worked properly. As he loaded his gear into the boat, Marcus thought about how different his life had become. 6 months ago, he was just another stressed-out tech worker living in a small apartment, ordering takeout food every night, and working 12-hour days. Now he owned this incredible piece of nature where he could escape whenever he needed peace. Marcus started the boat engine and slowly moved away from the dock. The motor made a gentle humming sound that mixed with the morning bird songs. He drove the boat to the center of the lake, where Uncle Thomas had told him the fishing was best. The old man had given him this tip during their last conversation. At that Christmas dinner years ago, "The big ones like to hide in the deep water," Uncle Thomas had said with a rare smile. "Right in the middle where the lake is deepest. That's where you'll find the fish that have been smart enough to survive." Marcus dropped his anchor and prepared his fishing rod. He chose a simple setup: a small weight, a hook, and a piece of corn for bait. Sometimes the simplest methods worked best. He cast his line into the water and watched the ripples spread out in perfect circles. The silence was incredible. Marcus could hear everything: water lapping against his boat, wind moving through the pine trees, a hawk calling from somewhere high above. In the city, he never heard these sounds. There was always traffic, sirens, construction, or neighbors playing loud music. But here, nature provided the only soundtrack. As Marcus sat in his boat, He thought about Uncle Thomas. The man had lived alone at this lake for over 30 years. He had no wife, no children, and rarely spoke to the family. Marcus wondered if his uncle had been lonely or if he had found perfect happiness in this quiet place. Looking around at the peaceful water and beautiful scenery, Marcus was starting to understand why someone might choose this life. A fish tugged on his line, bringing Marcus back to the present moment. He set the hook and began reeling in his catch. It was a nice-sized bass, silver and green, with a strong fight. Marcus smiled as he brought the fish into the boat. This was exactly what he needed: simple pleasure, fresh air, and the satisfaction of catching his own food. He released the fish back into the water and cast his line again. There was no hurry, no schedule to keep, no emails to answer. For the first time in months, Marcus felt truly relaxed. His shoulders dropped, his breathing slowed, and the constant worry in his mind began to fade away. The sun climbed higher in the sky, burning off the morning mist and revealing the full beauty of the lake. Marcus caught 3 more fish, each one making him smile. He ate a sandwich and drank cold lemonade while floating in the middle of his lake. His lake. The words still sounded strange in his mind, but they were true. As the morning continued, Marcus felt grateful to Uncle Thomas for this unexpected gift. The quiet man had given him something more valuable than money. He had given him peace, beauty, and a place to remember what really mattered in life. Little did Marcus know that his peaceful morning was about to be interrupted by an angry woman who believed she had every right to kick him off what she thought was her family's lake. Marcus was just starting to feel like this was the perfect day when he heard a loud noise in the distance. The peaceful morning sounds of birds and gentle water were suddenly broken by the roar of a powerful boat engine. The sound got louder and louder, coming closer to where Marcus sat fishing in the middle of the lake. He looked up from his fishing rod and saw a huge white yacht racing across the water toward him. The boat was at least 3 times bigger than his simple fishing boat. It had shiny chrome details, fancy blue trim, and looked like it cost more money than Marcus made in 5 years. The yacht was moving fast, creating big waves that rocked Marcus's small boat back and forth. Marcus grabbed the sides of his boat to steady himself as the waves hit. His tackle box slid across the floor, and his coffee cup nearly fell into the water. He had never seen such an expensive boat on his lake before. During his 2 previous visits, the lake had been completely empty, except for the ducks and fish. The yacht pulled up right next to Marcus's boat, so close that he could have reached out and touched it. The engine noise was so loud that Marcus couldn't hear anything else. Then suddenly the engine stopped, and the silence felt strange after all that noise. A woman appeared on the deck of the yacht. She looked to be in her 50s, with perfectly styled blonde hair that didn't move even in the wind. She wore designer sunglasses that probably cost more than Marcus's entire fishing setup. Her white outfit looked expensive and spotless, like she had just stepped out of a fashion magazine. Gold jewelry sparkled on her wrists and around her neck. The woman stared down at Marcus with a look that could freeze fire. Her mouth was set in a hard line, and even though he couldn't see her eyes behind the dark glasses, Marcus could feel her anger. She stood on her deck like a queen, looking down at a peasant who had dared to enter her kingdom. "Excuse me," the woman called out in a sharp, cold voice that cut through the morning air like a knife. "You need to move your little boat right now. This is a private lake, and you are not supposed to be here." Marcus looked up at her, confused. He had spent hours reading all the legal papers when he inherited the property. Everything was clear. He owned the lake, the land around it, and had every right to be there. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I think there's been some kind of mistake. I'm not doing anything wrong. I actually own this lake." The woman's face turned red, and Marcus could see her hands shaking with anger. "That's completely ridiculous," she shouted. "You can't just come here and claim to own a lake because you feel like fishing. This is Whitmore Lake, and my family has owned it for over 50 years. Behind the angry woman, Marcus could see a man in his 60s standing quietly on the yacht. He was wearing a light blue polo shirt and khaki pants, and he looked uncomfortable with the whole situation. The man kept looking between his wife and Marcus, like he wanted to say something but didn't dare interrupt. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but I have all the legal documents. Marcus said, trying to keep his voice calm and polite. My Uncle Thomas left me this property when he died 6 months ago. I can show you the papers if you want to see them. The woman laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh that made Marcus's skin crawl. Your Uncle Thomas? I don't know any Thomas, and I don't care about your fake papers. My grandfather built our summer house on this lake in 1970. We've been coming here every summer for my entire life. We pay taxes on this property. Marcus felt his heart sink. This was getting more complicated than he had expected. The woman clearly believed what she was saying. She wasn't just trying to cause trouble. She really thought her family owned the lake. But Marcus knew his legal papers were real. The lawyer had been very clear about everything. What's your name? The woman demanded, pulling out an expensive-looking phone. I'm calling the police right now and my lawyer. You picked the wrong family to mess with, young man. My name is Marcus Williams, he answered honestly. And I'm not trying to mess with anyone. I just came here to fish on my own property. The woman started dialing numbers on her phone, pacing, back and forth on her yacht deck like a caged animal. Hello, this is Patricia Whitmore, she said into the phone. I need to report a trespasser on my family's private lake. Yes, he's sitting right here in a boat, claiming he owns the place. It's completely outrageous. While Patricia talked on the phone, her husband finally stepped forward. He looked embarrassed and worried. I'm sorry about this, he said quietly to Marcus. My wife gets very protective of our family property. I'm Robert Whitmore. We've been coming to this lake since Patricia was a little girl. Marcus nodded politely. I understand, sir. But I really do own this lake. I inherited it from my Uncle Thomas. Maybe your family knew him? Robert frowned and thought for a moment. Thomas. There was an old man who lived in that cabin, over there. He pointed toward Marcus's cabin. We barely saw him. He kept to himself mostly, but we always assumed he was just the caretaker or something. Patricia finished her first phone call and immediately started making another one. Hello, Mr. Davidson. This is Patricia Whitmore. I need you to come to the lake immediately. We have a situation with someone claiming to own our property. Yes, I'll pay extra for the emergency visit. Marcus realized this was going to be a long day. He had come to the lake for peace and quiet, and instead he was in the middle of what looked like it might become a legal battle. But he wasn't going to be bullied off his own property, even by a woman in an expensive yacht. Mrs. Whitmore, Marcus called out politely. I think we should both get our lawyers here and sort this out properly. I don't want any trouble, but I'm not leaving my own lake. Patricia stopped talking on her phone and glared at him. Your lake? Your lake? We'll see about that, Mr. Williams. When the police get here, you're going to be very sorry you tried to steal from the Whitmore family. The morning that had started so peacefully was now filled with tension, anger, and the promise of a fight that neither Marcus nor Patricia was ready to back down from. The lake that had been so quiet and beautiful just an hour before was now the center of a storm that was about to change everything for both families. The tension on the lake was thick like fog. Marcus sat in his small fishing boat trying to stay calm while Patricia Whitmore paced on her yacht like an angry tiger in a cage. She had made 3 phone calls already, and Marcus could hear her, getting more upset with each conversation. I don't care if it's Saturday morning, Patricia shouted into her phone. This is an emergency. Some stranger is on our family lake claiming he owns it. Get down here right now. She hung up and immediately started dialing another number. Marcus decided he needed to call his own lawyer. He pulled out his phone and found Sarah Chen's contact information. Sarah was the lawyer who had handled Uncle Thomas's will and helped Marcus with all the inheritance paperwork. She was smart, tough, and always answered her phone. Sarah, it's Marcus Williams, he said when she picked up. I'm at the lake property you helped me inherit, and there's a woman here claiming her family owns it. She's called the police and her lawyer. Can you come out here? Of course, Sarah replied immediately. I have all your paperwork in my office. Don't let anyone intimidate you, Marcus. Your ownership is completely legal and clear. I'll be there in an hour. While Marcus was on his phone, Patricia finished her latest call and turned her attention back to him. Who are you calling? More fake lawyers to help with your fake papers? She yelled across the water. I'm calling my real lawyer who handled the real inheritance, Marcus replied, trying to keep his voice steady. She'll be here soon with all the documents. Robert Whitmore looked more worried with each passing minute. He kept trying to get his wife's attention, but she was too angry to listen to him. Finally, he raised his voice. Patricia, maybe we should calm down and wait for the lawyers to figure this out. Calm down? Patricia spun around to face her husband. Robert, this man is trying to steal our lake. The lake where we had our honeymoon 30 years ago. The lake where our children learned to swim. I will not calm down. Marcus felt bad for Robert. The man clearly loved his wife but was stuck in the middle of a situation that was getting worse by the minute. Marcus also started to understand why Patricia was so upset. If she really believed her family owned the lake, then from her point of view he was the bad guy trying to take away something precious. Mrs. Whitmore, Marcus called out. I can see why you're upset, but fighting won't solve anything. Let's wait for the police and the lawyers. They can look at all the papers and figure out the truth. Patricia laughed, but there was no humor in it. The truth? The truth is that my family has been taking care of this lake for 50 years. We've paid for maintenance, we've kept it clean, we've treated it like our own child. And now some stranger shows up with fake papers trying to take it away. As they waited, more boats started appearing on the lake. Word had spread somehow, and curious neighbors were coming to see what all the commotion was about. Marcus saw 3 small fishing boats and a pontoon boat heading their way. This was turning into a public spectacle, which was the last thing he wanted. An older man in one of the fishing boats called out, Patricia, what's going on? We heard shouting from across the lake. This man is trespassing on our lake, Mr. Henderson, Patricia shouted back. He claims he owns it, which is completely ridiculous. Mr. Henderson looked confused. But Patricia, I thought your family just rented that cabin over there. I remember your grandfather talking about paying rent to some hermit who lived alone. Patricia's face went pale. That's not true. Grandpa bought this property fair and square. He told us so many times. Marcus's heart started beating faster. Maybe Mr. Henderson knew something important about the history of the lake. Uncle Thomas had been a hermit who lived alone. The pieces were starting to fit together. Robert moved closer to his wife. Patricia, you know Grandpa sometimes and embellish stories. Remember how he used to say he was a war hero, but we found out later he never left the country? Don't you dare talk about Grandpa that way, Patricia snapped. He was an honest man who worked hard to give our family this beautiful place. The sound of sirens in the distance made everyone turn toward the shore. 2 police cars were driving down the dirt road that led to the lake. Behind them, Marcus could see Sarah Chen's silver car and another vehicle that probably belonged to Patricia's lawyer. Finally, Patricia said with satisfaction, now we'll get this sorted out properly. As the police officers got out of their cars at the shore, Marcus felt nervous for the first time. He knew his papers were legal, but Patricia seemed so sure of herself. What if there was something he didn't know? What if Uncle Thomas had made some kind of deal with the Whitmore family that wasn't in the official records? One of the police officers, a middle-aged man with graying hair, called out across the water. Can everyone please come to shore? We need to sort this out on land where we can spread out documents and talk properly. Marcus started his boat engine and began moving toward the dock. Patricia's yacht followed, making much more noise and creating bigger waves. The other boats full of curious neighbors also headed for shore, turning what should have been a private legal matter into a community event. As they approached the dock, Marcus could see Sarah Chen standing with a thick folder of papers under her arm. She looked confident and professional in her business suit. Next to her stood a man in an expensive suit who was probably Patricia's lawyer. He looked less confident and kept checking his phone. This is it, Marcus thought to himself. Time to find out who really owns this lake. The boats reached the dock at almost the same time. Patricia jumped off her yacht like she was ready for battle. Marcus tied up his simple fishing boat and stepped onto the dock with much less drama. But his heart was pounding just as hard as hers. The police officer walked over to them. I'm Officer Johnson. Can someone please explain what's happening here without any shouting? Both Marcus and Patricia started talking at the same time. their voices mixing together in a confusing mess of claims and accusations. Officer Johnson held up his hand. "One at a time, please. Let's start with the documents and figure out the facts before we hear any more stories." Officer Johnson looked like a man who had dealt with neighbor disputes many times before. He was patient, but firm as he gathered everyone around a picnic table near the dock. The curious neighbors stayed in their boats nearby, close enough to hear everything but far enough to avoid getting directly involved. Sarah Chen opened her thick folder and pulled out several official-looking documents. Patricia's lawyer, a nervous man named Mr. Davidson, opened his briefcase but seemed to have much fewer papers. This was already a bad sign for Patricia's case. "Let's start with the basics," Officer Johnson said. "Mr. Williams, you claim to own this property through inheritance. Can you show me the documents?" Sarah handed over a stack of papers. "Here's the will from Thomas Henderson, the death certificate, and the deed transfer that was filed with the county 6 months ago. Everything has been properly processed and recorded." Officer Johnson examined the papers carefully. Marcus noticed that Patricia had gone very quiet, which was different from her earlier angry shouting. She watched the officer's face, trying to read what he was thinking. Mr. Davidson cleared his throat nervously. "Officer, my client's family has been using this property for over 50 years. They have receipts for property taxes they've been paying." "Let me see those receipts," Officer Johnson said. Mr. Davidson pulled out a small folder with tax documents. As the officer looked through them, his eyebrows raised. "These taxes are for a small parcel of land where your cabin sits, Mrs. Whitmore. They're not for the lake or the surrounding property." Patricia's face went white. "That can't be right. My grandfather always said we owned the lake too." Sarah Chen spoke up. "Officer, if I may explain what we've discovered. Mr. Thomas Henderson, Marcus's uncle, owned this entire 200-acre property, including the lake, for over 30 years. He rented a small cabin and 5 acres to the Whitmore family, but the rental arrangement was informal. No written lease, just handshake deals and cash payments." Robert Whitmore stepped forward, looking embarrassed. "I think I need to tell the truth here. My wife's grandfather, Frank Whitmore, was known for stretching the truth sometimes. He always told the family he had bought lake property, but I found some old letters in his things after he died. They were thank you notes to someone named Thomas for letting us use the beautiful lake another summer." Patricia spun around to face her husband. "Robert, why didn't you tell me about those letters?" "Because I knew it would break your heart," Robert said softly. "You love this place so much. You've told everyone we know about our family lake. I didn't want to embarrass you." The truth was finally coming out, and Marcus could see Patricia struggling with it. Her whole world was falling apart. The lake she had thought belonged to. Her family was actually owned by the quiet old man she had barely noticed over the years. Mr. Henderson, the neighbor who was still listening from his boat, spoke up. "I remember now. Frank Whitmore used to complain about paying rent to that hermit Thomas. He said Thomas was too cheap to sell him the lake, only wanted to rent it out." Patricia sat down heavily on the picnic table bench. All her anger had turned into shock and sadness. "So we've been renters this whole time? For 50 years? Sarah Chen nodded gently. "According to the records, yes, but your family were excellent tenants. Thomas Henderson kept notes about how well you took care of the property and how much you loved the lake." "He kept notes about us?" Patricia asked in a small voice. Marcus felt sorry for Patricia now. She wasn't a mean person trying to steal his property. She was a woman who had just learned that her family's most treasured possession was never really theirs. "Mrs. Whitmore, Uncle Thomas did mention your family once. At a Christmas dinner years ago, he said the lake had good people who respected it. I think he was talking about you." Officer Johnson closed the folders of documents. "Well, this is clear from a legal standpoint. Mr. Williams owns the property through proper inheritance. Mrs. Whitmore, your family has been renting, not owning. But this seems like a civil matter between landlord and tenants, not a criminal issue." Patricia's lawyer looked relieved that his client wasn't in legal trouble, but Patricia herself looked devastated. "What happens now? Do we lose our cabin, our summer home, all our memories?" Marcus had been thinking about this exact question while the documents were being reviewed. He had grown up in a family that didn't have much money, and he understood how important family traditions could be. He also understood how embarrassing this situation was for Patricia. "Mrs. Whitmore," Marcus said carefully, "I don't want to take away something that means so much to your family. Your family has been part of this lake's story much longer than I have." Patricia looked up at him with surprise. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe we can work something out. You've been good tenants for 50 years. Maybe we can make it official now with a proper lease agreement. You can keep your cabin and your lake access." Robert's face lit up with hope. "You would do that? Even after Patricia was so rude to you?" Marcus smiled. She was protecting something she loved. I can't blame her for that. Besides, this lake is big enough for both of our families. Patricia wiped tears from her eyes. She looked embarrassed and grateful at the same time. "I owe you a huge apology, Marcus. I was horrible to you and you're being so kind to us." Sarah Chen looked pleased with how things were turning out. "We can draw up a proper lease agreement that protects both families. Fair rent, clear boundaries, and shared lake access." Officer Johnson nodded approvingly. "This is how neighbor disputes should be solved, with understanding and compromise instead of lawyers and court battles." The neighbors who had been watching from their boats started clapping. Mr. Henderson called out, "That's the spirit. This lake has always brought people together, not torn them apart." As the crowd began to break up, Patricia walked over to Marcus. "I'm truly sorry for how I acted today. You're a better person than I deserve." Marcus shook her hand. "Fresh start, Mrs. Whitmore. I think Uncle Thomas would be happy to know his lake is bringing people together instead of driving them apart." The sun was getting higher in the sky, and what had started as Marcus's peaceful fishing trip had turned into something much more important, the beginning of an unexpected friendship. 3 weeks later, Marcus was back at the lake for another early morning fishing trip. But this time, everything was different. As he prepared his boat at the dock, he could hear voices and laughter coming from the Whitmore cabin across the water. Patricia and Robert had returned for their summer stay, and the atmosphere was completely changed. The legal paperwork had been completed quickly. Sarah Chen had drawn up a fair lease agreement that gave the Whitmore family official rights to their cabin and 5 acres of land around it. They also got permanent access to the lake for swimming, boating, and family activities. In return, they paid reasonable rent that was actually less than what Frank Whitmore had been secretly paying Uncle Thomas for 50 years. Marcus cast his fishing line into the calm morning water and smiled as he remembered the day Patricia signed the lease. She had brought homemade chocolate chip cookies to his apartment in the city and apologized again for her behavior. She also brought old photo albums filled with pictures of her family at the lake over the decades. "I want you to see why this place means so much to us," Patricia had said, turning the pages slowly. "Here's my daughter Sarah taking her first steps on the dock. Here's my son Michael catching his first fish. Here's Robert and me on our 10th wedding anniversary." Looking at those photos, Marcus understood completely why Patricia had fought so hard. The lake wasn't just property to her family, it was the backdrop for their most precious memories. Every summer vacation, every family reunion, every important moment had happened at that lake. The sound of a boat engine interrupted Marcus's thoughts. He looked up to see Patricia and Robert approaching in a small speedboat. But instead of the angry confrontation from 3 weeks ago, Patricia was waving and smiling. "Good morning, Marcus," she called out cheerfully. "How's the fishing today?" "Pretty good so far," Marcus replied, holding up a nice bass he had caught earlier. "The fish seemed to be biting today." Robert steered their boat closer. "We brought coffee and fresh muffins if you want to take a break from fishing. Patricia has been baking all morning." Marcus was touched by the gesture. He pulled in his fishing line and tied his boat to theirs so they could sit together on the water. Patricia handed him a thermos of hot coffee and a blueberry muffin that smelled incredible. "These are amazing," Marcus said after taking a bite. "You're a great baker." Patricia beamed with pride. "My grandmother's recipe. She used to make them every summer when I was little. I've been thinking about teaching you some of the lake traditions if you're interested." Over the past 3 weeks, Patricia had become a completely different person around Marcus. The angry, defensive woman was Gone, replaced by someone who was warm, funny, and surprisingly thoughtful. She had even started calling him to check if he needed anything when she went grocery shopping for the cabin. Speaking of traditions, Robert said, we're having our annual summer barbecue next Saturday. The whole family comes, kids, grandkids, cousins. We'd love for you to join us. Marcus felt honored to be included. I'd like that very much. Can I bring anything? Just yourself, Patricia said. Although if you want to show off your fishing skills, fresh fish would be perfect for the barbecue. As they sat together drinking coffee and watching the morning sun sparkle on the water, Marcus marveled at how much had changed. The lake that had been the source of such conflict was now bringing them together as friends and neighbors. I have something to tell you both, Marcus said. I've been thinking a lot about Uncle Thomas and why he left me this place. I think he knew exactly what he was doing. Patricia and Robert looked curious. What do you mean? Robert asked. I think he saw that I was stressed and unhappy in the city, working too much and not enjoying life. And I think he knew your family would help me understand what this lake is really about, not just property ownership, but community and family traditions. Patricia's eyes got watery. That's a beautiful way to think about it. Thomas was always watching from his cabin. He saw how much joy our family got from the lake. Maybe he wanted you to experience that too. I think you're right, Marcus said. And I have an idea. What if we create some new traditions together? I love fishing in the early mornings when it's peaceful, but maybe we could have regular barbecues or boat races or fishing competitions. Robert got excited. Our grandson Jake is coming next month. He's 10 years old and obsessed with fishing. He would love to learn from an expert like you. I'd be happy to teach him, Marcus said. Uncle Thomas taught me that the best fishing spots are secrets that get passed down from one generation to the next. Patricia clapped her hands together. Oh, this is perfect. Jake has been asking me to teach him fishing, but I'm terrible at it. You could be like an honorary uncle to him. The idea of being part of a family again appealed to Marcus more than he expected. His own parents lived far away, and he didn't have many close friends in the city. The thought of having people to share the lake with made it even more special. There's something else, Marcus said. I've been thinking about Uncle Thomas's cabin. It's too big for just me, and I only come here on weekends anyway. What if we fixed it up together and used it as a community gathering place? We could have game nights, movie nights, holiday celebrations. Patricia and Robert exchanged excited looks. That sounds wonderful, Patricia said. Our cabin is small, and when the whole family comes, we're packed like sardines. Having extra space would be perfect. As the morning went on, the three of them made plans for the summer. Fishing lessons for Jake, family barbecues, a 4th of July boat parade, and maybe even a winter ice fishing party. The lake that had divided them was now the foundation for a friendship that none of them had expected. When it was time to go back to shore, Marcus felt happier than he had in years. He had found more than just a peaceful place to fish. He had found a community, a family, and a new understanding of what really mattered in life. As they tied up their boats at the dock, Patricia turned to Marcus with a mischievous smile. You know, I still can't believe you stayed so calm when I was screaming at you that first day. Most people would have screamed right back. Marcus laughed. I work in tech, Mrs. Whitmore. Dealing with angry people is part of my job. But I have to admit, you were definitely the most dramatic client I've ever had. Please call me Patricia, she said. And I promise, no more drama. From now on, this lake is going to be nothing but peace, friendship, and really good fishing. Looking out at the calm water where their conflict had begun, Marcus knew Uncle Thomas would be proud of how everything had turned out. The lake had brought enemies together and turned them into family.